Hello everyone, Ramafool here, back with another 80th anniversary review, and today we will be taking a look at the new Motorized 2025 Flying Scotsman. So, Scotsman is one of the engines I was most excited for in this line, and you may have seen my review on his 2016 Trackmaster model. This one was a need for me because it does not have those annoying steam clouds on his sides. It is a clean version that we should have had to begin with. I was surprised they even made Scotsman again for this range since he never had a major role in the series. But Bachmann is also making a model of him now, and it makes me wonder why he's suddenly getting recognition again. Is it the fact that he's a real/famous engine, or that he's related to one of the main characters of this brand? Regardless, I'm really grateful for this. I would think they'd focus more on major characters like Emily, but he was in the Railway series, so I'm satisfied with who they chose to make here. Anyway, here's Scotsman unboxed, and he looks so much better without that steam on him. Now, the only downside to this model is that the tenders are so small compared to the engine. But before we get into that, let's start off by taking a closer look at Scotty himself, and I really like his overall design. Most tender engines are harder to tackle in this scale when it comes to their proportions, but I think Scotsman is their best one. He doesn't look as out of shape like Gordon and James. It's particularly unfortunate that Gordon, out of all major characters in this series, is so poorly designed, especially since they're brothers. If they just made his proportions a little similar to Scotsman's, we probably could have had more consistency between the two. But back to Scott, you'll notice he's been given a few upgrades, such as the white outer lining on his boiler bands. They really didn't need to go this far with them, but it's certainly a welcome addition. Now, one thing that concerned me prior to getting him was how it would come out on the model that I got. Of course, I don't expect it to be perfect, but knowing the quality and manufacturing of these toys today, I was afraid some of the lining on mine would be misaligned. But it actually doesn't look too bad. I've seen lots of Scotsman models where it tends to veer off at the corner of his boiler, and it's usually on the left side where that happens. But most of it seems to intersect on this one, so I'm fine with it. Apparently, some of that lining seems to have been printed on top of the molding for his nameplates and splashers, or at least on mine. Though not a big deal, thankfully it doesn't continue over the sides. Also, he has no actual mold for his handrails, just like the boiler bands, these are printed decals. Kinda odd since Gordon and James have molded handrails, but considering Scotsman is a minor character, I bet they didn't want to waste time on making new molds for him. Though it's not too necessary, he still gains them some way. Looking at his cab, you'll see the lining around his 4472 has been outlined in white as well. I didn't even notice this until I compared him to his early model, as the lining on that is solid black. I'll do a quick comparison once I finish covering the engine. Plus, you may have noticed that they've given him rivets along the top and bottom despite not actually gaining any there in the series. However, they're pretty much randomly placed anywhere on these toys now, so it's something to expect at this point. The windows are now hollow, similar to those on everyone else in this line, which is nothing too big, but it's cool. I like how we've gone from the printed white ones to these hollow cutouts. And the interior is a separate piece, which I'm pretty sure shares the same mold as the roof. By the way, this part is reused from Gordon, along with the bogie wheels, pistons, and cylinders. I definitely like the addition of the cylinders and bogie wheels on these engines, but Scotsman's pistons are green instead of black. This could probably have something to do with the fact that they share the same mold as the front bogie wheels. For the most part, it's a good thing they didn't make that piece black, otherwise the wheels would be discolored. Although they probably could have easily painted the pistons, but nope, they likely let it slide for budget cuts. I mean, it's not serious, but definitely a flaw with this version. Scotsman has the same wink-like expression as he does on his Trackmaster model, which still looks pretty good here. Although he does appear to be cross-eyed, similar to the Thomas that came in the Load and Launch set. Lots of people have been complaining about this, and honestly, I don't blame them. He does look rather funny with those pupils printed so close together. Though, personally, I wouldn't say it's as visually distracting. We've definitely seen more cringy things come out of this brand in recent years. But I do agree that the eyes are a little wonky on him. However, one major improvement with this version, not only are the buffers painted, but they are also round this time. Before, he was incorrectly depicted with oval buffers like Gordon. Though, if I recall, his running board was reused for him in Trackmaster Revolution, and that's probably why they were off from his actual appearance. But in this line, they've made an entirely different mold for that on Scotsman, which makes a whole big difference. Really impressed with this update. And the top is painted in black, which is great too. If he were released in a standard pack, this extra detailing would have most likely been left out. So that's the nice thing about being a 3-pack exclusive character, cause at this time you get a more detailed model. Here's a comparison to the Trackmaster version, and there are a couple of differences between the two. First off, the eyebrows are slightly different on each version. Unlike the original, which has one eyebrow slightly raised, the ones on the new one are pointed down more, making him look more arrogant. So I guess that alters the expression on him a little bit, but it's still pretty reminiscent of the other. The running boards are different colors, and they also resemble the engine in different ways. The old one is completely black, with the exception of the buffer being painted red, and that's more reminiscent of his real-life basis. However, the new one is red, which is more accurate to his CGI counterpart, so it's kinda interesting how they contrast here. Next, we'll look at the tenders, and while I do like their overall design, their size is what mainly holds him back from perfection. Again, they are so small in scale with Scotsman. In fact, they're nearly the same height as the previous tenders. Although they're fairly similar in appearance, these are actually new molds for this line, as the tops of them are separate pieces. But because their height has barely changed, they're also out of scale with the other 2025 ones. Gordon and James's tenders are likely taller not only to be in scale with their new models, but possibly for the sake of having removable coal. However, Scotsman's coal is still static, but I'm okay with that, to be honest. It's mostly the size of the tenders I have mixed feelings on. I can think of a couple of reasons why they're so small. It's likely they didn't want to add extra weight to him by making them bigger. Not to mention they probably would have looked more squished or distorted if their height was increased. The smaller scale does seem to do a better job at meeting their proportions in the series and real life, but still, it doesn't look as great with the taller engines. So much for two massive green tenders, very unfortunate. Though, interestingly enough, there do seem to be a few changes in their design. Like the engine, they both have black and white lining, nice to see that. However, the biggest change you might have noticed is the switch from the CGI style lining to the LNER tender-shaped lining. And this is more similar to how the real Flying Scotsman looked in the past, which I think is a really neat upgrade. I do recall some people not liking how it previously looked in the show. Me, personally, I don't mind it, but I do like that they've gone back to using elements from the real-life basis. Plus, they gain rivets along the bottom. Again, they're just randomly placed anywhere now. Though, I don't believe anyone pointed this out, but it's hardly noticeable. However, I did realize that most of the vertical lining on them is slightly crooked. And it's not a factory error on mine. Apparently, this is part of the final design. Really odd that it's like that. I'm not sure whether it was intentional or maybe there was a goof in the design. But again, not too problematic. I hardly even noticed it when I first saw this model, so you know what, it's fine. Also, the rear of each tender is less detailed, so all they have is a molded door frame with no tail lamps or any outer details. Not a big deal, but definitely would have looked more interesting if they kept that on there. And here's another look at the entire engine, and because he's longer, I wanted to take close-up shots of him and his tenders separately for better quality while zooming in. Now, final gripe on this model, because he has a longer coupling, there's a bigger gap between him and his tenders. Also, due to their small size, when coupled up to him, they look more like cargo cars. Yeah, the design process for this stuff has been pretty unstable ever since the redesign in 2014, and I think that's one reason why this brand has fallen short. It's not as meticulously crafted as it used to be, therefore not many people are motivated by it anymore. Though, final thoughts on Scotsman, I still like him despite his tenders being so small. The design is a clear improvement over Trackmaster Revolutions, and his body proportions are done pretty well in my personal opinion. Is he perfect? No, but in all fairness, I'm glad we got a Steam-free version of Scotsman in this range, and that he's getting recognition again. I would give him a 6 out of 10, so he basically ties with James. The engine alone I think is excellent, but the scale of the tenders do keep him from ranking higher. Still though, I would highly recommend him if you hated how he looked in 2016, cause this tends to make up for the steam on his last model. It's very difficult though finding these in stores, and he's only available in the first case of 80th Greatest Moments packs. If you find him in stock at Walmart or on their website, get him right away, cause these things sell out in seconds. Otherwise, your next best option is eBay, but he's more expensive over there. But anyway, that is my review on the new 2025 Motorized Flying Scotsman. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. This is Ramafool signing out.